My cheating husband and sister abandoned me at a gas station to start their affair. I disappeared. 5 years later, they tried to declare me dead for insurance money, but turned pale when they saw who stood behind me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The wooden door of the seaside cottage vibrated against my palm as the pounding on the other side continued. It was a heavy, frantic sound, the kind that demanded attention, the kind that assumed the person inside was weak, frightened, and easy to intimidate. I stood there in the cool hallway, smoothing the lapel of my navy blazer. I could hear his voice through the wood, a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years, but one that still had the power to make my stomach turn over. "Open up! We know you're in there, old woman," Derek shouted. "Don't make me call the sheriff to break this door down." Then, her voice. High-pitched, whiny, the voice of a woman who had never been told no in her entire life. "My sister, Brenda." "Derek, hurry up. This place smells like salt and dead fish. I want to get the papers signed and leave." They thought they were coming to bully my elderly Aunt Louise. They thought they were coming to force a senile old woman to sign away the rights to my existence so they could collect a $2 million life insurance payout. They thought Valerie, the quiet, mousewai, obedient wife and sister, was long gone, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. I looked at the man standing beside me. Garrett. He was tall, solid as a mountain, with eyes that held a calm, dangerous storm. He squeezed my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. His presence was my anchor. I took a deep breath. I reached out, unlocked the deadbolt, and threw the door wide open. The sunlight hit Derek's face, illuminating the sweat on his forehead and the sneer on his lips. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light of the hallway, the sneer vanished. His jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. Brenda dropped her designer handbag onto the porch with a dull thud. They weren't looking at a ghost. They were looking at me. But not the me they left behind. "Hello, Derek." "Hello, Brenda," I said, my voice steady as steel. "You're a little late for the anniversary party. Before I tell you how I brought them to their knees, I need to tell you how I got here. Before I could become this woman standing in the doorway, I had to die. Well, the old version of me had to die. And it happened on a scorching Tuesday afternoon, exactly 5 years ago, at a gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert. Thank you so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate you being here to listen to my story. Before we go back to that terrible day, please take a moment to comment down below and tell me what city or state you are watching from. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Now, let's go back to where it all ended, so I can tell you how it all began. It was supposed to be a celebration. 15 years. That's how long I had been married to Derek. 15 years of ironing his shirts, cooking his keto meals, managing his social calendar, and dimming my own light so he could shine. We planned a road trip to a luxury resort in Nevada. It was expensive, far more than we should have been spending given Derek's recent cash flow issues at work, but he insisted. He said we needed to reconnect. But there was a catch. There was always a catch with Derek. 2 days before we left, my younger sister, Brenda, showed up at our house in tears. She had broken up with her latest boyfriend, a guy named Chad or Brad, I couldn't keep track, and she was devastated. "She needs support, Val," Derek had said, looking at me with those puppy dog eyes I used to fall for. "We can't just leave her here alone. She's family. Let her come along. She can stay in the adjoining suite." I wanted to scream. It was our anniversary. But I did what Valerie always did. I swallowed my disappointment. I nodded. I packed an extra bag for her. I was the peacemaker. The doormat. The drive was excruciating. The air conditioning in Derek's SUV was struggling against the desert heat, but the atmosphere inside the car was even hotter. Brenda sat in the back seat, but she spent the entire time leaning forward, her hand resting casually on Derek's shoulder, laughing at his jokes. Jokes that weren't even funny. "Oh, Derek, you're terrible," she'd giggle, flipping her hair. "Valerie, isn't he hilarious?" "Hilarious," I muttered, staring out at the endless stretch of sagebrush and dust. I felt invisible. I was sitting in the passenger seat, but I felt like the third wheel. Around 2 p.m., the check engine light flickered, or at least Derek said it did. He pulled into a rundown gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the 80s. There was one pump, a flickering neon sign, and a heat that hit you like a physical blow the moment you opened the door. "Val, babe," Derek said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I need to check the oil. Can you run in and grab us some waters? And maybe some of those corn chips Brenda likes?" I think I left my wallet in the back with her bag. "I can go," Brenda offered, but she didn't move. She just stretched her legs out, looking like a cat in the sun. "Actually, my ankles are killing me." "I'll go," I said. I grabbed my purse, but Derek stopped me. "Leave your bag, babe. It's cluttered in here. Just take a 20 from the console." I did as I was told. I took the cash, stepped out into the blinding sun, and walked toward the dingy convenience store. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. It was cooler inside, smelling of old coffee and floor wax. I took my time, enjoying the reprieve from the heat and, honestly, to be away from them. I gathered 3 large bottles of water and a bag of chips. I was standing at the counter, waiting for the clerk, an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, to finish counting cigarettes. That was when I heard it. The roar of an engine. I turned my head toward the dirty glass window just in time to see the SUV peeling out of the lot. Dust billowed up from the tires. "Derek?" I whispered. I dropped the water bottles. They hit the floor with a loud thud, rolling in different directions. I pushed open the door and ran outside, waving my arms. "Derek! Derek, wait! I'm still here." The car didn't slow down. In fact, it sped up. And as it turned onto the highway, the rear window rolled down. I saw a hand wave. And I heard it, faintly, but clearly enough to slice through my heart. Laughter. They were laughing. I stood there in the dust, clutching a crumpled $20 bill, watching the love of my life and my own sister drive away and leave me in the middle of nowhere. I stood frozen on that cracked asphalt for what felt like an hour, though it might have been only minutes. The dust from their tires settled onto my skin, mixing with my sweat, making me feel gritty and dirty. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, thud thud thud, like a bird trapped in a cage. Surely, this was a joke. A cruel, immature, unfunny prank. Derek and his brothers used to do stuff like this in college. They called it hazing. Maybe he and Brenda thought it would be hilarious to make me sweat for 10 minutes and then circle back with cold sodas and an apology. I stared down the long, empty highway. The heat waves shimmering off the road distorted the horizon, making it look like water. But no car came back. "Honey?" A gravelly voice broke through my trance. I turned around. The woman from behind the counter was standing in the doorway of the gas station. She was wiping her hands on a grease-stained rag. Up close, she looked tough, leathery skin, eyes that had seen everything and were impressed by nothing. Her name tag read Marcy. "You gonna stand there until you melt, or you gonna come inside?" she asked. They're coming back," I stammered, my voice sounding thin and pathetic to my own ears. "It's just a joke. My husband, he has a weird sense of humor." Marcy didn't look convinced. She spit on the ground, narrowly missing a beetle. "A joke is when everyone laughs, sugar. You ain't laughing." And from where I stood, They looked like they were in a hurry. Come on. I got AC and I ain't charging for it. I followed her inside, sinking onto a plastic stool near the counter. The coolness of the store helped clear the fog in my brain. I realized my phone was in my purse. My purse was in the car. I need to call him, I said, panic rising again. My phone is with them. Marcy pulled a smartphone out of her apron pocket. It was an older model, the screen cracked like a spiderweb, but it worked. Use mine. But don't expect him to answer. I dialed Derek's number. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed Brenda. Voicemail. I called again. And again. On the 5th try, I stopped. Check the tracking, Marcy suggested. She leaned over the counter, her eyes sharp. You got that friend-finding app? My daughter uses it to track her cheating boyfriend. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type in my login information on Marcy's browser. I finally got into my cloud account. The map loaded slowly, the little blue dot pulsing. There they were. But they weren't turning around. They were 40 miles away, heading west. Toward the resort. And then, I saw the notification pop up on the screen, synced from my email. A transaction alert from our joint bank account. The Golden Sands Resort and Spa. Check-in completed. $4 500 asterisk. My stomach dropped all the way to the floor. They checked in. They didn't turn around to look for me. They didn't call the police to say I was missing. They checked into the luxury suite I had paid for. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me was the photo. Because my phone was linked to the cloud, and Brenda, stupid, vain Brenda, had auto-upload turned on for her camera roll. A new photo appeared in my stream, taken just minutes ago. It was a selfie. They were in the car. Derek was driving, wearing his sunglasses, a smirk on his face. Brenda was leaning over from the passenger seat, my seat. She was kissing his cheek. Her hand, with the expensive manicure I had paid for last week, was resting intimately on his thigh. The caption she had typed but hadn't posted yet was, finally free. Let the honeymoon begin. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt all the air leave my lungs, replaced by a cold, heavy stone. They aren't coming back, are they? Marcy asked softly. She had been watching my face. No, I whispered. They're having an affair. My husband. And my sister. Marcy let out a low whistle. That explains the rush. Listen to me, honey. You got 2 choices right now. You can call the cops, have them patch you through to highway patrol. They'll stop the car, bring him back here, and you can have a big screaming match on the side of the road while they lie through their teeth. I shook my head violently. The thought of seeing them right now, of seeing that smug look on Derek's face, of hearing Brenda's whining excuses, it made me nauseous. Or, Marcy continued, leaning closer, you can get smart. You got access to your money? I quickly opened the banking app. My breath hitched. The balance on our joint checking account, which had over $20,000 in it yesterday, was now down to $300. Derek had transferred everything. He had emptied us out before the trip even started. He took it, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and terror. He took it all. Not everything, Marcy said. Think. You got anything he doesn't know about? A stash? A credit card in your maiden name? And then I remembered. Grandma's legacy. My grandmother had left me a small inheritance 5 years ago. Derek knew about the money, but he thought I had spent it on the down payment for his new car. I hadn't. I had paid for the car with my bonuses. I had put Grandma's money into a high-yield savings account under my maiden name, Valery Morgan. I never touched it. I never linked it to our main finances. It was my just-in-case fund. I checked the balance. It was there. Safe. Untouched. $50,000. I have money, I said, looking up at Marcy. But I don't want them to find me. Not yet. Marcy nodded, a grim smile appearing on her face. Good girl. Don't get mad, get even. But to get even, you gotta disappear first. There's a bus coming through in about an hour. It goes north. Gets you off the grid. She went to the back room and came back with a phone charger and a baseball cap. Take these. And honey? Take pictures of everything right now. The tracking map. The bank transfer. That photo of them kissing. Save it all. Evidence is your best friend. I spent the next hour documenting my own betrayal. I took screenshots until my fingers cramped. I saved everything to a hidden drive. When the Greyhound bus rumbled into the station, kicking up dust clouds that looked like smoke, I turned to Marcy. I tried to hand her the $20 bill I still had clutched in my hand. She pushed it back. Keep it. You're gonna need every penny to bury those two. Just do me a favor? When you nail them to the wall, send me a postcard. I climbed onto the bus. As it pulled away, I didn't look back at the spot where my marriage ended. I looked forward, into the dark unknown, and for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't Mrs. Derek Reynolds. I was just Valerie. And Valerie was very, very angry. The bus smelled of stale disinfectant and diesel fumes. It was a night bus, filled with people who looked like they were running away from something or running toward nothing. I sat in the back, pulling Marcy's baseball cap low over my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool glass of the window. As the desert landscape blurred into streaks of indigo and black, my mind refused to rest. It kept replaying the last 15 years, like a movie reel that I had been watching with the wrong subtitles. Now, suddenly, I understood the plot. I thought about the fertility treatments. God, the nights I had spent crying in the bathroom, clutching negative pregnancy tests. We had tried for 7 years. I had injected myself with hormones until my belly was bruised and swollen. I had undergone 3 rounds of IVF. Every time it failed, Derek would hold me, sighing dramatically, and say, "Maybe it's just not meant to be, Val. Maybe your body just isn't built for it. We have each other, isn't that enough?" But tonight, in the dark of the bus, a memory surfaced, sharp and sickening. 2 years ago. I was taking my daily vitamins. Derek had insisted on organizing my pill organizer every Sunday. "Let me take care of you, babe," he'd say. "You're so stressed." I thought it was sweet. I thought he was being a partner. But one morning, I had dropped a pill on the floor. It rolled under the vanity. When I retrieved it, I noticed it looked slightly different from the folic acid supplements I was supposed to be taking. It had a tiny number stamped on it. I didn't think much of it then. I just swallowed it. Now, the realization hit me so hard I gasped aloud, startling the sleeping man across the aisle. They weren't vitamins. They were birth control pills. Or something to counteract the treatments. He hadn't been supporting me. He had been sabotaging me. And Brenda. My little sister. The one I practically raised because our parents were too busy climbing the social ladder. I remembered the way she would look at my clothes, my jewelry, my life. "Must be nice," she'd say, tracing a finger over my pearl necklace. "You get everything, Val. It's not fair." She didn't want a husband. She wanted my husband. She didn't want a house. She wanted my house. The house. Panic surged through me again. We lived in a suburban McMansion that was mortgaged to the hilt because Derek insisted on keeping up appearances. But there was another property. The city house. It was a brownstone in the city center that my grandmother had left solely to me. It was fully paid off. It was worth a fortune now. I had kept the deed in a fireproof box in my home office. Derek knew about it, of course. He had been pestering me to sell it for years to invest in his business ventures. I had always refused. It was the one thing I kept firm on. But now, if I was missing, or if he could forge my signature. I dug into my memory, trying to recall where the original deed was. Was it in the house? No. Wait. 3 years ago, when we had a break-in scare in the neighborhood, I had moved some important documents. I closed my eyes, visualizing my office. The bottom drawer of the filing cabinet? No. The safe in the closet? No. The safety deposit box. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I had moved the deed to a safety deposit box at a bank across town, a bank Derek didn't use. And the key was on my keychain. My keychain was in the car. With them. My heart started racing again. If they found the key, they could find the box. But they wouldn't know which bank. Not immediately. I had time. But not much. I needed a place to go. A place where they wouldn't look. A place where I could think. My parents were out of the question. They had always favored Brenda. If I called them, they would probably tell me I was overreacting and that I should apologize to Derek for running off. They would gaslight me, just like they always did. Oh, Valerie, don't be so dramatic. Brenda is just affectionate. You're being jealous. No. There was only one person in my family who saw through the nonsense. Aunt Louise. My mother's estranged sister. The black sheep. She lived in a small coastal town in Oregon called Whispering Bay. I hadn't seen her in 10 years, not since my wedding, where she had gotten drunk on champagne and told Derek to his face that he had the eyes of a lying weasel. My mother had banned her from family events after that. But Aunt Louise had hugged me tight before she left and whispered, "When you wake up, kiddo, you know where to find me." When you wake up. She knew. 10 years ago, she knew. I pulled out the burner phone Marcy had given me. I had swapped my SIM card out before leaving the gas station, terrified they might track me, but then realized even the SIM was a risk, so I destroyed it. I was using Marcy's phone purely for maps and emergency info until I could get a new one. Wait, no, Marcy kept her phone. I was defenseless. I relied on the kindness of the passenger next to me, a young college student named Leo. Can I look up a number? I asked him. He handed me his phone without hesitation. I searched for Louise Morgan in Whispering Bay, Oregon. There was a listing. I didn't call. I couldn't risk it. I just memorized the address. The bus ride took 2 days. I transferred in Salt Lake City, then Boise. I barely ate. I washed my face in bus station bathrooms. I watched the country change from arid desert to rolling hills, and finally, to the misty, pine-covered coast of Oregon. When I stepped off the bus in Whispering Bay, the air smelled of salt and rain. It was gray and overcast, a stark difference from the blinding sun of the desert. It felt like a different planet. I walked 3 miles to the address I had memorized. My feet were blistered in my sandals meant for a resort pool, not a refugee march. I found the house. It was a weathered Victorian cottage with peeling blue paint and a garden overflowing with wild hydrangeas. It looked chaotic and beautiful. I walked up the porch steps and knocked. A few moments later, the door opened. Aunt Louise stood there. She was wearing a violently purple caftan and holding a cigarette in one hand and a half-knitted scarf in the other. She looked older, her face lined with more wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as tacks. She looked me up and down. She took in my dirty clothes, my matted hair, the baseball cap, and the sheer exhaustion etched into my bones. She didn't ask what happened or why are you here. She just took a drag of her cigarette, exhaled a cloud of smoke, and said, "Took you long enough. The kettle's on." I collapsed into her arms and finally, I wept. Aunt Louise's house smelled of lavender, old books, and tobacco. It was a clutter of memories, framed photos of dogs she'd outlived, stacks of vinyl records, and vibrant knitted blankets thrown over every piece of furniture. It was the complete opposite of the sterile, beige, magazine-ready prison I had kept for Derek. For the first 2 days, I didn't talk. I just slept. I slept in the guest room under a quilt that weighed 10 pounds, waking up only to drink the soup Louise left by the bedside. When I finally emerged on the 3rd morning, Louise was in the kitchen, feeding a stray cat that had wandered in through the window. "You look less like a corpse today," she commented, pouring me a mug of black coffee. "Sit. Eat toast. Then talk." I told her everything. I told her about the gas station, the text messages, the empty bank account, the birth control pills, the feeling of being completely erased from my own life. Louise listened without interrupting. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She didn't say, "Oh, poor you." Instead, her face grew darker and harder with every sentence. When I finished, she slammed her hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. "And that little viper sister of yours." I knew she was rotten from the cradle. "Your mother spoiled her so much the girl thinks the world is her personal buffet." "They have everything, Aunt Lou," I said, my voice trembling. "They have my house, my car, my money. They probably told everyone I ran away or worse." "They don't have everything," Louise corrected me, pointing a manicured nail at my chest. "They don't have you. And they don't have the city house, right? You said the deed is in a box?" "I don't have the key," I admitted. "Doesn't matter. You're the owner. We can get a locksmith. We can get new lawyers. But first, we need to secure you." That afternoon, Louise drove me into town in her ancient station wagon. We went straight to a small law office nestled between a bakery and a hardware store. "This is Mr. Abernathy," Louise introduced me to a man who looked like he was about 100 years old, wearing a bow tie. "He's been my lawyer since the Carter administration. He's going to help us build a wall around you." We spent 3 hours drafting documents. I executed a power of attorney granting Louise the right to make decisions if I was incapacitated, specifically revoking any rights Derek might claim as a spouse. We drafted a document formally separating my assets from Derek's as of the date of abandonment. "This is a declaration of separation," Mr. Abernathy explained, his voice wavering but his mind sharp. "By filing this, we establish that any debt he incurs from this day forward is his alone. And we freeze the assets you can control." "What about the city house?" I asked. "We put a lien on it," he said, smiling a toothy grin. "A friendly lien. Louise will lend you $5, and in exchange, you secure the debt with the house. We record it. If Derek tries to sell it, the title search will show a cloud on the title. He won't be able to close a deal without contacting Louise." It was brilliant. It was vicious. I loved it. But the emotional blow came when I asked Louise about my parents. "Should I call Mom and Dad?" I asked on the drive home. "They must be worried sick." Louise gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Valerie, honey. You need to know something. Your mother called me yesterday." My heart leaped. "She did? Is she looking for me?" "She called to ask if I had seen you," Louise said slowly. "But not because she was worried. Brenda had spun them a story. Brenda told them you had a nervous breakdown at the gas station. That you were screaming about aliens and ran off into the desert. She told them you've been unstable for years. What? I gasped. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. But your parents, they chose to believe it. Your mother said, well, Valerie always was a bit fragile. At least Derek has Brenda to help him through this difficult time. The words hit me like a physical slap. At least Derek has Brenda. My parents weren't worried about me. They were relieved that their golden child, Brenda, was stepping into my shoes. They were already rewriting history to make Brenda the hero and me the crazy, defective daughter. They threw me away, I whispered, looking out at the gray ocean. Yes, Louise said firmly. They did. So now, you cut the cord. You don't call them. You don't explain. You let them think whatever they want. Because the Valerie they knew is gone. You're someone else now. You're a Morgan. And Morgans don't break. We get revenge. That night, I went to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. I took off my wedding ring. It was a diamond solitaire, beautiful and heavy. I looked at it one last time, remembering the day Derek put it on my finger and promised to love me forever. Liar, I said to the wind. I threw the ring as hard as I could. It glittered in the moonlight for a second before disappearing into the churning black waves below. I didn't feel sad. I felt lighter. I turned back toward the cottage. I had a lot of work to do. I had $50,000 in a secret account, a fierce aunt, and a burning need to make sure that when I finally resurfaced, I would be the storm that drowned them all. The first 6 months were a blur of trauma and reconstruction. You don't just get over being abandoned by your entire support system. The betrayal lived in my body. I had nightmares. Vivid, terrifying loops where I was back at that gas station, but instead of driving away, Derek ran me over. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart racing so fast I thought I was having a heart attack. Aunt Louise didn't coddle me, but she anchored me. When I woke up from those nightmares, I'd find her in the kitchen, knitting at 3 a.m. She wouldn't ask what I dreamt. She'd just slide a cup of chamomile tea across the table and say, "Tell me about the stock market." That was my salvation. Numbers. I couldn't go back to nursing, my license was under my married name, and I was terrified of being found before I was ready. So, I turned to the one thing Derek had always mocked me for, my interest in finance. "You're too risk-averse, Val," he used to say when I suggested investment strategies. "Leave the money stuff to the men." Well, the man had stolen my life savings. So I decided to teach myself how to build it back. I spent my days at the local library, using their computers. I devoured books on day trading, real estate investment trusts, and forensic accounting. I started with my $50,000, my freedom fund. I didn't gamble it. I studied patterns. I invested in boring, stable tech stocks that were undervalued. I learned to short sell when I saw companies that were run by arrogant men like Derek, companies that were all flash and no substance. It worked. Slowly, methodically, my money grew. 50,000 became 60. Then 80. But money couldn't fix the hole in my chest. One rainy Tuesday, I saw a flyer on the library bulletin board, Women's Support Group. Survivors of domestic and emotional abuse. I hesitated. I didn't think of myself as an abuse survivor. He hadn't hit me. He had just left me. But Marcy's voice echoed in my head, "A joke is when everyone laughs." I went. There were 6 women in the circle. When it was my turn to speak, I couldn't get the words out. I just shook. A woman named Sarah, who had a scar running down her cheek, reached out and held my hand. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to say his name. You just have to say you're still here." "I'm still here," I whispered. And then the dam broke. I talked about the gas station. I talked about the years of feeling small. I talked about the infertility and the suspicion that he had sabotaged me. When I finished, the room was silent. Then, an older woman named Clara spoke up. "Honey, that wasn't abandonment. That was an attempted murder of your soul. He wanted you to disappear so he wouldn't have to face the guilt." That session changed everything. I realized I wasn't just a victim of a bad breakup. I was a survivor of a long-term con. Derek hadn't loved me. He had used me as a placeholder until he could secure my assets and move on to the next shiny object, my sister. This realization didn't make me sad anymore. It made me cold. It made me focused. I started taking care of myself. I cut my hair into a sharp, chic bob and dyed it a rich chestnut, getting rid of the mousy brown Derek liked. I started running on the beach every morning, pushing my body until my lungs burned, exorcising the weakness. I also began to construct my new identity. I legally changed my name. I dropped Reynolds. I dropped my father's last name. I became Valery Morgan. Just Morgan. Like my grandmother. One evening, about a year after I arrived, I was sitting on Louise's porch, reviewing my portfolio. My investments had hit a milestone. I had doubled my initial capital. I was solvent. I was independent. My phone pinged. It was an alert I had set up on a burner email account, a Google alert for Derek Reynolds and Brenda. I opened the link. It was a social media post from a mutual friend I hadn't blocked. It was a picture of a housewarming party. My housewarming party. There they were. Derek and Brenda, standing in the living room of my suburban home, the one I had decorated, the one I had paid the mortgage on for years. They were holding champagne flutes. Brenda was wearing a dress I recognized, it was mine. She was wearing my clothes, living in my house, sleeping in my bed. The caption read, "So happy to finally settle into our forever home. Love conquers all." I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, on the mantelpiece, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a framed photo of me. But it wasn't a nice photo. It was a picture from when I had the flu, looking pale and ragged. They kept a picture of me looking sick on display. Why? To play the grieving relatives? To show everyone how unstable poor Valerie was before she vanished? I felt a flash of the old panic, but I clamped it down. "Enjoy the champagne, Derek," I whispered to the screen. "Because you're drinking it on a sinking ship." I closed the laptop. I wasn't ready to strike yet. I needed more leverage. I needed to know exactly what they were doing with the city house. And for that, I needed legal firepower that Mr. Abernathy couldn't provide. I needed a shark. Little did I know, I was about to meet someone who was more like a guardian whale. The Whispering Bay Public Library was my second home. It was a small, stone building that smelled of dust and sea salt. I had my own corner table where I researched market trends and stalked my husband's financial footprint online. 2 years into my new life, I was no longer the frightened woman who stepped off the bus. I was Valery Morgan, an independent day trader with a modest but growing fortune. But I was solitary. I didn't trust people. Especially men. Then came the day the roof leaked. I was at my table, deep into a forensic accounting textbook, when a drop of water splashed onto the page. I looked up. The ceiling tile was sagging. "Here, let me move that for you." The voice was deep, resonant, like a cello. I flinched, pulling my papers closer instinctively. A man was standing there. He was older, maybe late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and wearing a flannel shirt that looked worn but clean. He didn't look like the corporate sharks I was used to dealing with in my past life. He looked solid. He pulled the heavy oak table away from the leak with effortless strength. "Roof's been bad since the storm last week," he said, smiling. His eyes were crinkling at the corners, kind eyes. Not evaluating. Just seeing. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice clipped. I see you're reading The Art of Asset Recovery, he noted, glancing at my book. Light afternoon reading? I'm studying, I said defensively. It's a good book, he said. But Chapter 4 on offshore trusts is a bit outdated since the 2021 regulations changed. I blinked. You've read it? I wrote the foreword to the second edition, he said casually. Then he extended a hand. Garrett. I come here for the murder mysteries, but I used to live in those law books. That was how it started. Garrett wasn't just a local handyman, as I had assumed from his truck. He was Garrett Thorne, a former senior litigator from Seattle who had retired early after his wife passed away. He had moved to Whispering Bay for the quiet, just like me. We started talking. First about books, then about the economy, and then, slowly, about life. He was patient. He was the opposite of Derek. Derek loved to hear himself talk, Garrett loved to listen. Derek needed to be the smartest person in the room, Garrett actually was the smartest person in the room but never made you feel small. For months, we were just library friends. But one evening, a fierce storm knocked out the power in town. Aunt Louise's old cottage started taking on water. I was on the roof, trying to tarp a leak in the driving rain, slipping and panicking. Garrett's truck pulled into the driveway. He didn't ask. He just grabbed a ladder and tools and climbed up beside me. Go inside, Val, he shouted over the wind. I got this. I can do it. I yelled back, stubbornness flaring. I know you can, he yelled. But you don't have to. Let me help. You don't have to. I stopped. For 15 years, I had to do everything because if I didn't, it wouldn't get done, or Derek would criticize me. Garrett wasn't telling me I was weak. He was offering partnership. We fixed the roof together. Afterward, soaking wet in Louise's kitchen, drinking whiskey to warm up, I looked at him. Why are you so nice to me? I asked. You don't even know who I am. Not really. Garrett set his glass down. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath hitch. I know you're smart. I know you're wounded. And I know you're hiding from something that terrifies you. But I also see you getting stronger every day. And I'd like to be on your team when you finally decide to stop hiding. I started crying. Not the hysterical tears of the gas station, but tears of relief. I told him everything. The gas station. The sister. The forged life. The fear that they were still out there, spending my money, living my life. Garrett listened, his expression shifting from concern to a cold, hard anger. When I finished, he didn't scream. He became very, very quiet. He abandoned you in the desert, Garrett said, his voice low. That's endangerment. Then he stole your joint assets. That's theft. And now he's living in your house. Yes. Garrett stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. I retired because I was tired of fighting for corporations who didn't care. But I think I have one more fight left in me. He turned back to me. Valerie, if you want to take them down, we don't just sue them. We bury them. We use the law like a scalpel. Are you ready to do that? I looked at this man, this steady, brilliant, protective man, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like prey. I'm ready, I said. Good, Garrett said. First step, we find out exactly what they've been doing for the last 3 years. I still have my investigator license. Let's go hunting. With Garrett's help, we didn't just Google them. We dissected their lives. Garrett had access to databases that the general public didn't, property records, credit reports, court filings. We turned Aunt Louise's dining room into a war room. Maps, timelines, and financial flowcharts covered the walls. What we found was worse than I imagined. "Look at this," Garrett said one evening, pointing to a credit report on his laptop screen. "Derek's credit score is tanking. He's maxed out 4 cards in the last year. He's missing payments on the BMW. "But he took all our money," I said, confused. "He had over $20,000 from the joint account, plus whatever he's making at the firm." "He was fired 2 years ago," Garrett revealed. "For misappropriation of company funds. He's been unemployed. They're living off credit and, wait." Garrett frowned, clicking on a new tab. "He's trying to refinance the city house. The one you own." "He can't," I said confidently. "The deed is in my name. And Mr. Abernathy put that lien on it." "He can if he claims you're dead," Garrett said. The room went silent. The air felt suddenly very cold. "What?" Garrett turned the screen toward me. It was a court filing dated 3 months ago. "Petition for declaration of death in absentia." "He's petitioning the court to have you declared legally dead," Garrett explained, his voice devoid of emotion, which was his way of controlling his anger. "He's claiming you walked into the desert and never returned. He has affidavits from your parents stating you were mentally unstable. If the judge grants this, your assets transfer to him as the surviving spouse. The city house becomes his. And the life insurance," I realized, feeling sick. "I had a $2 million policy. My company paid for it." "Exactly. That's the endgame. He's broke. Brenda is high maintenance. They need that $2 million to bail them out." I stared at the screen. They weren't just happy I was gone. They were actively trying to erase my existence to cash in on my corpse. But then, Garrett found something else. A medical billing record that had been sent to our old address but forwarded to a collection agency because Derek hadn't paid it. "Val," Garrett said softly. "You need to see this." It was a bill from an OB/GYN clinic. Date of service, 1 month after the gas station incident. Patient, Brenda Morgan. Procedure code, termination of pregnancy. I stared at the paper. Brenda was pregnant. 1 month after they left me. That meant she was pregnant before the trip, I whispered. That's why she came along. That's why she was so clingy. She was carrying his child. And she terminated it, Garrett noted. Look at the notes on the collection dispute. Patient disputes charge, claims partner promised to pay. Derek didn't pay for it. I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Of course he didn't. He didn't want a baby. He wanted the money. If Brenda had a baby, he'd have to pay support. He made her get rid of it. I thought about my 7 years of IVF. My desperate prayers for a child. And here was my sister, pregnant with my husband's child, and they threw it away just like they threw me away. Because it was inconvenient for their lifestyle. It was the final nail in the coffin of my mercy. They are monsters, I said. Both of them. Yes, Garrett agreed. But monsters make mistakes when they get hungry. And they are starving for cash. How do we stop the death declaration? I asked. We don't, Garrett said, a dark smile forming on his lips. Not yet. We let them think they're winning. We let them get all the way to the finish line. We let them commit to the lie under oath. Why? Because lying to me is rude, Garrett said. But lying to a probate judge? That's perjury. Attempting to collect insurance on a living person? That's insurance fraud. Forging a signature on a mortgage application? He pulled up one last document. It was a loan application for the city house, dated last week. At the bottom was a signature, Valery Reynolds. It looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. That's a felony, Garrett said. He forged her name to try and get a loan before the death certificate even came through. He's desperate. I looked at the forged signature. It was shaky. He's trapped, I said. He is, Garrett said. But we need to spring the trap in person. We need to lure them out. How? We use the one thing they want more than anything, Garrett said. The city house title. Mr. Abernathy's lien is blocking them. They need the lien released. And the only person who can release it is the person holding the note. Aunt Louise, I realized. Exactly. Derek has hired a cheap private investigator to find Louise. We know this because I intercepted the query. Garrett tapped his keyboard. The PI thinks he found her. He's going to tell Derek that Louise is alive and living in Whispering Bay. So they'll come here, I said, my heart starting to race. To bully her into releasing the lien. They'll come here expecting a confused old lady, Garrett said. They won't expect the wife they killed to be waiting behind the door. I looked at my hand. The hand that used to wear Derek's ring. Now, it was steady. Let them come, I said. I want to see their faces when the dead woman opens the door. The waiting was the hardest part. For the next week, we prepared for the siege. Garrett contacted the local sheriff, an old fishing buddy of his. He explained the situation, the fraud, the harassment, the potential threat. We showed the sheriff the forged documents and the death petition. So, let me get this straight, Sheriff Miller said, chewing on a toothpick. This guy thinks you're dead, is trying to cash in your policy, and is coming here to harass your aunt? That's about the size of it, Garrett said. And you want me to do what? Wait down the road, Garrett said. When they show up, I'll signal you. I want you to witness the threats. I want you to hear them admit to the fraud. Sheriff Miller nodded. I hate city slickers who think they can push folks around. I'll be there. We also prepped Aunt Louise. She was thrilled. She treated it like a theater production. I should wear my black shawl, she insisted. Look frail. Lure them into a false sense of security. Just be yourself, Louise, I said, kissing her cheek. You're scary enough. Garrett also reached out to the insurance company's fraud investigation unit. It turned out that Garrett knew the head of the department. He made a quiet phone call. The insurance company agreed to play along with Derek's claim for a few more days, stalling him, making him more desperate, forcing him to come to us for the city house money. Then, the notification came. Garrett had hacked the GPS of the rental car Derek had booked under his own name, using a credit card that was already over its limit. They're crossing the state line, Garrett announced, looking up from his tablet. They'll be here in 3 hours. I felt a wave of nausea. It was one thing to plan this, it was another to know that in 3 hours, I would be breathing the same air as them. I can't do it, I panicked, pacing the living room. Garrett, what if I freeze? What if I see him and I turn back into that pathetic woman at the gas station? Garrett caught me by the shoulders. He looked deep into my eyes. Valery. Look at me. I stopped. The woman at the gas station didn't have $50,000 in the bank. She didn't know how to short sell a stock. She didn't survive 5 years on her own. And she didn't have me. He pulled a document out of his briefcase. And she didn't have this. It was a court order Garrett had obtained that morning. An emergency restraining order and a freeze order on all assets related to the identity of Valery Reynolds/Morgan, pending a fraud investigation. You hold the cards, Garrett said. They are walking into a lion's den holding a pork chop. I took a deep breath. I looked at the man I had fallen in love with. Not the flashy, superficial love I had with Derek, but a deep, rooted love built on respect and shared scars. Okay, I said. Let's get dressed. I went to my closet. I bypassed the comfortable sweaters I usually wore. I pulled out the outfit I had bought specifically for this day. A tailored navy blazer. Crisp white shirt. Tailored trousers. And heels. Sharp, click-clack heels. I put on my makeup. Not too much. Just enough to highlight the sharp angles of my face, angles that used to be hidden by baby fat and stress. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a CEO. I looked like retribution. They're here, Louise called from the front window. Black SUV. Parking on the lawn. Rude. I walked into the hallway. Garrett was waiting. He wore a suit, looking every inch the high-powered attorney he used to be. Ready? He asked. Ready. We heard the car doors slam. We heard the crunch of gravel under expensive shoes. We heard Brenda complaining about the mud. Then, the pounding on the door began. Thud. 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 Open up! We know you're in there, old woman. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. I looked at Garrett. He nodded. I reached for the lock. It was time to wake the dead. Before we opened that door, there was one final knife that had to be pulled out of my back. And this one didn't come from Derek or Brenda. It came from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My parents. A few hours before Derek's car pulled into the driveway, while Garrett and I were finalizing our strategy, his phone pinged with a new email from his private investigator contact. Val, Garrett said, his voice unusually heavy. You need to see this. It's the final piece of their petition for your death declaration. I walked over to the dining table, my stomach already tightening. What is it? It's a sworn affidavit, Garrett said, turning the laptop toward me. Signed by Robert and Eleanor Morgan. My parents. I sat down, my hands trembling as I read the legal document. The words blurred before my eyes, but the meaning was clear. Sharp. Deadly. We, Robert and Eleanor Morgan, hereby attest that our daughter, Valerie Reynolds, has a long history of mental instability. She often spoke of disappearing. She was prone to hysterical episodes and delusional thinking. We believe she wandered into the desert during a mental health crisis. We fully support Derek Reynolds in his petition to manage her estate, as he has been a devoted husband and son-in-law during this tragedy. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Devoted husband? I choked out, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. He abandoned me. And they know it. Deep down, they have to know it. Why would they sign this? Garrett scrolled down to the second page. It was an email exchange between Derek and my father. Bob, once the insurance payout clears, I'll transfer the $100,000 loan repayment we discussed. Brenda is really looking forward to helping you update the kitchen. We just need this paperwork to go through so we can all move on. The room spun. They sold me. My own parents sold me for a kitchen renovation. For 5 years, I had held onto a tiny sliver of hope. Maybe Brenda had lied to them so convincingly that they truly believed I was crazy. Maybe they were just victims of manipulation. But this email proved otherwise. They were negotiating. They were trading my life for a payout. They knew Derek was after the money, and instead of questioning it, they asked for their cut. They aren't victims, I whispered, the realization settling into my bones like ice. They're accomplices. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the gray ocean churned against the rocks. I thought about all the times my mother had criticized me for not being as fun as Brenda. All the times my father had told me to stop being so uptight when I complained about Derek's spending. They never loved me. They loved what I could do for them. And when I stopped being useful, they cashed me out. Do you want to call them? Garrett asked gently. I shook my head. No. If I call them, I'll scream. And they don't deserve my voice. I walked over to the shredder in the corner of the room. I had a copy of my birth certificate on the table, the one I had retrieved to prove my identity for the new bank accounts. I picked it up. Val, what are you doing? Garrett asked. I'm becoming an orphan, I said. I fed the paper into the shredder. The machine word, eating the proof of my lineage. From this moment on, I said, my voice steady and cold, I have no parents. I have no sister. I have no husband. The only family I have is in this room. I looked at Aunt Louise, who was watching me with tears in her eyes, and Garrett, who looked ready to burn the world down for me. Garrett, I said. Add a clause to the lawsuit. I want to sue my parents for defamation of character based on this affidavit. And I want to block them from receiving a single penny of my estate if something actually happens to me. Garrett nodded, typing furiously. Done. We'll file it tomorrow. Good. That was the moment the last tether snapped. The guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for their approval, it all evaporated. I wasn't fighting for reconciliation anymore. I wasn't fighting to make them understand. I was fighting to burn the corruption out of my life. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the sad, pleading daughter. She was a warrior who had just cut off a gangrenous limb to save the body. I was ready. And then, we heard the car. The crunch of tires on gravel. The slamming of doors. The sound of Brenda's high-pitched complaining drifting through the window. Ugh, look at this mud, Derek. My Jimmy Choos are going to be ruined. Why does she live in a swamp? Just get the signature, Brenda, Derek's voice. Irritated. Arrogant. Then we can leave this dump and go celebrate. They were celebrating my death. They were celebrating the money they thought they were about to steal. I walked into the hallway, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Garrett stood by the door, his hand resting lightly on the knob. Showtime, he whispered. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel fear. I felt power. Open it, I said. Garrett stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, letting me take the center stage. I reached out and turned the brass lock. Click. I pulled the heavy oak door open. The afternoon light flooded the entryway, blinding me for a split second. But then, my vision cleared, and there they were. Derek stood on the porch, his hand raised as if he were about to pound on the wood again. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, he had gained weight in 5 years, likely from stress eating and too much alcohol. His face was puffy, his hairline receding. Brenda stood a few steps behind him, clutching her designer bag like a shield. She looked brittle. Her makeup was heavy, trying to hide the lines of bitterness around her mouth. She wore a white dress that looked suspiciously like something I used to own, altered to fit her frame. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. The only sound was the distant crash of waves and the crying of seagulls. Derek's eyes widened. He blinked, once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. Brenda dropped her bag. It hit the wooden porch with a dull thud. Her hands flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. Valery? Derek finally choked out. It was a whisper, raspy and terrified. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the cold indifference of a judge looking at a petty criminal. Hello, Derek, I said calmly. You're looking tired. He stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over a potted plant. You're dead. You're supposed to be dead. Disappointed? I asked, arching an eyebrow. No. No, of course not. He started to sweat, beads of perspiration popping out on his forehead instantly. Val, oh my God. I've been looking for you. For 5 years. We thought you wandered off. We thought you were gone. Did you? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Is that why you emptied our bank account 15 minutes after you drove away? To fund the search party? Derek turned pale. Brenda found her voice then. It was shrill, bordering on hysterical. You have some nerve. You disappear for 5 years, putting us through hell, and you just stand there acting like nothing happened? Do you know how much we suffered? Mom and Dad are heartbroken. Heartbroken enough to trade my life for a kitchen renovation? I shot back. Brenda flinched as if I had slapped her. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, I said. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just like you know exactly whose dress you're wearing. I stepped out onto the porch. They instinctively stepped back, retreating down the stairs onto the gravel path. So, I said, my voice projecting clearly so the sheriff, hidden down the road, could potentially hear if they got loud. You came here to bully Aunt Louise. You wanted her to sign a release for the lien on the city house. Why? So you could sell it before the ink on my death certificate was dry? Derek tried to regain his composure. He straightened his jacket, trying to summon the arrogant salesman persona he used to wear so well. Now, Val, let's not be dramatic. We came to check on Louise. And yes, to settle the estate. We have bills to pay. Your disappearance caused a lot of financial strain on the family. My disappearance caused strain? I laughed. Or was it the fact that you haven't held a job in 3 years, Derek? Was it the gambling debts? He froze. How do you know about that? I know everything, I said, taking another step forward. I know about the credit cards. I know about the foreclosure notices on the suburban house. I know about the fake PI you hired. I turned my gaze to Brenda. And I know about the clinic visit, Brenda. The one a month after you left me in the desert. Brenda let out a strangled sob. Her face went gray. She grabbed Derek's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. Derek, let's go. We have to go. We're not going anywhere. Derek snapped, shaking her off. He turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the cornered rat aggression I remembered so well. Listen to me, Valerie, he growled, stepping up the stairs again, invading my personal space. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, or who you've been sleeping with to get this information, but you are still my wife. That house is marital property. And you are coming home with me right now to sort this mess out. I am not losing everything because you decided to have a midlife crisis. He reached for my arm. His hand was clammy and rough. Don't touch me, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I'll do whatever I want, he shouted, his face turning red. You are my wife. You belong to me. She belongs to no one, a deep voice rumbled from behind me. Derek stopped. He looked over my shoulder. Garrett stepped out of the shadows. He moved smoothly, placing himself between me and Derek. He didn't shove Derek, he just occupied the space with such authority that Derek was forced to retreat or collide with a wall of muscle. Garrett stood a full head taller than Derek. He looked down at my ex-husband with utter contempt. Who the hell are you? Derek spat, trying to sound tough but failing miserably. I'm the man who is going to make sure you never sleep soundly again, Garrett said calmly. I'm her fiancé. And I'm her attorney. Derek's eyes darted between Garrett and me. He saw the way Garrett stood, protective, solid, immovable. He saw the way I looked at Garrett, with trust. Fiancé? Derek laughed nervously. She's married to me. That's bigamy. Actually, Garrett said, pulling a folded document from his inside pocket. It's pending litigation. And this. He handed the paper to Derek. This is a temporary restraining order. You are currently in violation of it by being within 50 feet of my client. Derek snatched the paper. He read it, his hands shaking. You can't do this, he whispered. I just did, Garrett said. And if you don't get off this property in the next 30 seconds, the sheriff, who is parked right behind that hedge, is going to arrest you for trespassing and harassment. Derek looked at the hedge. He looked at me. He looked at the ruin of his plans crumbling in his hands. But he wasn't done. His ego wouldn't let him be done. Derek stared at the restraining order, his face contorting through a spectrum of emotions, confusion, rage, and finally, a desperate, oily charm. It was the same look he used to give when he'd forgotten my birthday or spent our savings on a sure-thing investment. He switched gears so fast it was almost impressive, in a sickening way. He crumpled the paper in his hand and let out a forced, breathless laugh. He looked at me, softening his eyes, tilting his head. Val, baby, he crooned, stepping back but keeping his palms up in a gesture of surrender. Okay. This got out of hand. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. I'm overwhelmed. Seeing you alive, it's a miracle. He took a hesitant step toward me, ignoring Garrett. Do you remember our honeymoon? Hawaii? Remember how we promised to always fight for each other? I made a mistake leaving you there. I panicked. Brenda panicked. We were scared. We came back, I swear we did, but you were gone. Liar, I said simply. I'm not lying. He sounded almost convincing. Val, look at us. We were a team. We built a life. You can't just throw 15 years away because of one bad day. And this guy? He gestured vaguely at Garrett. He's just a rebound. He doesn't know you like I do. He doesn't know how you like your coffee. He doesn't know about your anxiety. My anxiety? I repeated. You mean the anxiety you manufactured by gaslighting me for a decade? I was trying to help you. Derek pleaded. I took care of you. And Brenda, she was just trying to help too. We're family, Val. Family forgives. Brenda was sleeping with you, I said. Before the trip. During the trip. After the trip. That's not true. Brenda shouted from the bottom of the stairs, wiping her mascara-stained cheeks. We only got together because we were grieving. We bonded over losing you. Is that why you were pregnant a month later? I asked. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the seagulls seemed to stop screaming to listen. Brenda looked at Derek. Derek looked at the ground. How? Brenda whispered. How do you know that? I have the medical bills, Brenda, I said. The ones Derek didn't pay. The ones that went to collections. Brenda let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She turned on Derek, shoving his chest. You said you paid it. You said you took care of it. You told me it was handled. Shut up, Brenda. Derek hissed. No, I won't shut up. She was unraveling now, the stress of the confrontation breaking her fragile composure. You made me do it. I wanted to keep it. You said we couldn't afford a baby until Valery's money came through. You made me kill my baby for money we didn't even get yet. She collapsed onto the gravel, sobbing into her hands. I looked at them. My husband. My sister. Tearing each other apart over the scraps of a life they stole from me. You see, Derek? I said softly. You don't have a family. You have hostages. And you're a terrible captor. Derek looked at Brenda with pure disgust. He didn't bend down to comfort her. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me, and his mask fell away completely. The charm was gone. The fake love was gone. All that was left was the greed. Fine, he sneered. You want to play hardball? Fine. You're alive. Congrats. That means we split the assets. I'm still entitled to half of everything you've made in the last 5 years. We're still married. Washington is a community property state. So whatever little nest egg you've built up with this sugar daddy? Half of it is mine. He pointed a finger at me. I will drag this out in court for years. I will bleed you dry in legal fees. I will make sure you wish you had stayed dead. Garrett laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that startled Derek. You really should have done your homework, Derek, Garrett said. Washington is a community property state. But Oregon? Where Valery has been a resident for 5 years. It's an equitable distribution state. And more importantly, Valery filed a legal separation of finances 5 years ago, citing abandonment. Derek blinked. She what? Mr. Abernathy filed it the week she arrived, Garrett explained, enjoying every syllable. It was published in the local legal notices. You missed it because you were too busy spending her money. Legally, your financial union ended the day you drove out of that gas station parking lot. You aren't entitled to a dime of what she's made since. But the house! Derek shouted. The city house. That was before. Ah, the city house, Garrett said. Valery, would you like to tell him? I smiled. I sold it, Derek. Derek's face went slack. You can't. The lien. I released the lien this morning, I said. And I transferred the title to a holding company 3 days ago. The sale is pending. And the proceeds? They're going into a trust that you can't touch. But don't worry. I didn't keep all the money. You didn't? Hope flickered in his greedy eyes. No, I said. I used a significant portion of it to hire a forensic accounting firm to audit your finances for the divorce proceedings. And to hire the best criminal defense attorney for me. Because I have a feeling I'm going to need to testify against you in your fraud trial. Fraud? Derek stepped back. I haven't committed fraud. Forging a signature on a loan application is bank fraud, Garrett said. Filing a false death petition is perjury. And attempting to collect life insurance on a living person is insurance fraud. We sent the evidence package to the district attorney this morning. Derek looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at his car, then at the road, clearly calculating if he could run. I wouldn't, Garrett warned, reading his mind. The sheriff is pulling up right now. Down the driveway, the sheriff's cruiser rolled into view, lights flashing silently. Derek Reynolds, the man who thought he was the smartest person in the room, the man who treated people like disposable tissues, finally realized he was the one being crumpled up and thrown away. When Sheriff Miller's cruiser crunched to a halt behind Derek's rental SUV, the air shifted. It went from a domestic dispute to a crime scene. Miller stepped out of the car. He was a big man, moving with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who carried a gun and a badge for a living. He adjusted his hat and walked up the driveway, his eyes locked on Derek. Afternoon, folks, Miller drawled. Garrett. Ms. Morgan. He nodded to us, then turned his gaze to Derek. You must be the husband. I am, Derek said, trying to straighten his spine, trying to summon some authority. Officer, thank God you're here. These people they're holding my wife hostage. They're threatening me. Miller looked at me. You being held hostage, ma'am? No, Sheriff, I said clearly. I am standing on my aunt's property, asking this man to leave. My attorney has served him with a restraining order. Miller looked back at Derek. Seems pretty clear to me, son. You got paperwork saying you ain't supposed to be here. That paperwork is bullshit. Derek shouted, losing control again. She's my wife. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Garrett interjected smoothly. And I strongly suggest you exercise it. Derek turned on Garrett, stepping forward aggressively. You think you're so smart? You think you can just steal her and her money? I'll ruin you. I'll sue you for alienation of affection. Garrett didn't flinch. He just looked at Derek with pity. Derek, look at your car. Derek turned around. A tow truck was backing down the driveway, blocking the exit. Hey! Derek yelled. What are you doing? That's my car. Actually, I said, checking my phone. According to the alert I just got from the bank, that rental was paid for with a credit card that was reported stolen this morning. Stolen? Derek's eyes bulged. It's my card. It's the joint card, I corrected him. The one you maxed out. I called the bank an hour ago and reported unauthorized usage. Since I'm still the primary account holder, they froze it and flagged the rental transaction as fraudulent. The rental company wants their car back. You bitch! Derek screamed. He lunged at me. It happened fast. But Garrett was faster. Before Derek could get up the first step, Garrett moved. He didn't punch him. He used a move I had never seen before, a fluid, martial arts deflection. He caught Derek's wrist, twisted it behind his back, and pinned him against the porch railing. Sheriff! Garrett called out. Assault! Miller was already moving. I saw it. Attempted assault in the presence of an officer. Miller pulled his handcuffs from his belt. Click. Click. The sound of metal ratcheting shut on Derek's wrists was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Derek Reynolds, Miller recited, you are under arrest for assault, trespassing, and violation of a restraining order. And I believe the state police have a few questions for you regarding some forged loan documents. Derek was thrashing, shouting obscenities. Brenda! Brenda, do something. Call Dad. Get a lawyer. Brenda was still sitting on the gravel, staring blankly at the scene. She looked up as Derek was dragged toward the cruiser. She didn't move to help him. She didn't pull out her phone. She just watched, her face void of emotion. Brenda? Derek screamed as Miller shoved him into the back seat. Brenda looked at me. He said he would take care of me, she whispered. He promised. He lied, I said. He lies to everyone, Brenda. Even you. The tow truck driver was hooking up the SUV. Brenda stood up shakily. My bag is in there. And my phone. You can get them from the impound lot in the city, the driver said gruffly. Or you can walk. Brenda looked at the long, dusty road leading out of Whispering Bay. She looked at her ruined heels. She looked at the darkening sky. I can't walk, she whimpered. Valerie. Val, please. Give me a ride. Please. I'm your sister. I looked at the woman who had laughed as she drove away 5 years ago. I looked at the woman who had slept with my husband. I looked at the woman who had tried to declare me dead. I remember a gas station, I said softly. I remember begging you to stop. I remember you laughing. I'm sorry, she wailed. I was stupid. I was jealous. Please, Val. Don't leave me here. I turned to Garrett. Shall we go inside? I believe Aunt Louise has tea ready. We shall, Garrett said. I turned my back on her. I walked into the house and closed the door. Through the wood, I could hear her screaming my name. I heard her banging on the door for a minute, then two. Then, slowly, the sounds faded into sobbing, and finally, silence. I didn't lock the door. I didn't need to. The wall between us was stronger than wood. It was built of 5 years of indifference. I walked into the kitchen. Aunt Louise was sitting at the table, a teapot and 3 cups waiting. She looked at me, her eyes shining with pride. Well done, she said. I sat down. My hands were shaking, just a little. Not from fear. From the adrenaline of finally letting go. Is it over? I asked Garrett. Garrett sat beside me, covering my hand with his. The confrontation is over. The legal battle is just beginning. But yes, the hard part is done. They know you aren't a victim anymore. I took a sip of tea. It tasted like lavender and victory. The days following the arrest were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. Derek made bail, barely, using a bondsman and likely leveraging my parents' house, which made me feel a dark sense of irony. But he couldn't leave the state. His passport was seized. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Chin, called us in for a meeting. She wanted to review the evidence before pressing the felony fraud charges. We sat in a sterile conference room, me, Garrett, Ms. Chin, and a detective. Mrs. Reynolds, excuse me, Ms. Morgan, Ms. Chin corrected herself. Your husband claims this is a misunderstanding. He claims he had verbal permission from you years ago to manage the assets and that he genuinely believed you were deceased. He's lying, I said. We know he's lying, Ms. Chin said. But proving intent to defraud beyond a reasonable doubt is tricky. He's painting himself as the grieving husband who is just trying to keep the estate afloat. Show her the video, Garrett said. What video? Ms. Chin asked. I pulled a small USB drive from my purse. This was the ace up my sleeve. The one piece of evidence I had never shown anyone, not even Aunt Louise, until recently. 5 years ago, I said, my voice steady, when I was at the gas station, I met a woman named Marcy. She worked the counter. She saw everything. And she gave me the security footage. I plugged the drive into the laptop. Marcy hadn't just given me advice, she had downloaded the security camera feed from that hour onto a drive for me before I got on the bus. She said, you might need this to prove you didn't just walk away. I pressed play. On the grainy screen, the SUV was visible at the pump. You could see me get out and walk into the store. You could see Derek checking the oil. Then, you saw the moment that convicted him. Derek walked around to the passenger side window. He leaned in. He and Brenda talked. He laughed. He kissed her. Then, he looked at his watch. He looked at the store where I was. He made a let's go motion. He got in the driver's seat. But before he drove off, he did something else. He reached into the back seat, grabbed my purse, rummaged through it, pulled out my wallet and phone, and tossed the purse onto the pavement next to the pump. Pause, Garrett said. The image froze. Derek's hand was mid-air, discarding my bag. He threw out my ID, I said. He threw out my means of survival. If he thought I was coming back to the car, why would he throw my purse out? And if he thought I was missing later, why didn't he mention finding my purse at the scene in the police report? Oh wait, he never filed a police report. Ms. Chin leaned in, her eyes narrowing. That's abandonment. That's premeditation. He stripped you of your resources. Keep watching, I said. The video played. The car sped off. I ran out. I waved. And then, the rear window rolled down. You couldn't hear the laughter on the tape, but you could see Brenda's arm hanging out, waving goodbye. You could see Derek's face in the side mirror, smiling. Ms. sat back. That's not a grieving husband. That's a man dumping a dog. There's more, Garrett said. He laid out the folder containing Brenda's medical records, obtained through a subpoena Garrett had filed regarding the joint expenses Derek claimed. The termination of pregnancy. 1 month later. It proves the affair predates the abandonment. It proves motive. He wanted to start a new life with his mistress, but he needed Valery's money to do it. So he staged a disappearance. And here, I added, sliding the email printout across the table. The email to my parents. Negotiating a payoff for their testimony. Ms. Chen picked up the email. She read it twice. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and respect. Your parents signed this? Yes. Ms. Morgan, Ms. Chen said, closing the file. I have enough here to put him away for 10 years. Fraud. Larceny. Conspiracy. And I'm going to look into charges for your sister too, as an accomplice. Do it, I said. And your parents? I hesitated for only a second. If they perjured themselves on that affidavit, they should face the consequences. Ms. Chen nodded. Justice is blind, Ms. Morgan. We will follow the evidence where it leads. Walking out of that building, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. It was the weight of their narrative. For 5 years, I worried that maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was unlovable. Maybe I deserved it. But the evidence didn't lie. I wasn't crazy. I was the victim of a calculated, cruel plot. And now, I was the author of the ending. You okay? Garrett asked, taking my hand as we walked down the courthouse steps. I'm better than okay, I said, looking up at the sky. I'm vindicated. Hungry? Starving. Let's get burgers, he said. And then, let's go plan a wedding. I squeezed his hand. I'd like that. But the drama wasn't quite over. Because rats, when trapped, will bite their own tails off to escape. And Derek Reynolds had one last desperate move to make. The criminal charges were terrifying for Derek, but the financial ruin was what broke him. Garrett and I had triggered what we called the financial guillotine. Because I had sold the city house and placed the funds in a trust, Derek couldn't touch them. But because he had forged the loan application using the house as collateral before he owned it, he was now on the hook for the down payment of the high-risk loan he had taken from a loan shark to pay for his legal defense. Wait, let me clarify. Derek, desperate for a lawyer who could fight Garrett, had borrowed money from private lenders, sharks, against the future value of the city house. Now that the house was sold to someone else, the sharks wanted their money. And Derek had nothing. His credit cards were frozen. The rental car company was suing him. The IRS was auditing him, thanks to an anonymous tip. Okay, it was Garrett. A week before the trial was set to begin, I received a phone call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Valerie? It's Mom. My breath hitched. I hadn't heard her voice in 5 years. It sounded older, shakier. What do you want, Eleanor? I asked, refusing to call her Mom. Please, she sobbed. You have to stop this. They arrested your father this morning. Perjury is a crime, Eleanor, I said coldly. He signed a sworn statement saying I was insane. He lied to a court. We were scared, she cried. Derek told us you were gone. He said if we didn't sign, the insurance wouldn't pay out and we needed the money. The house needed repairs, and your father's pension. So you sold me for roof repairs? I interrupted. You sold your daughter for shingles? We didn't know you were alive. You didn't care. I shouted, my composure finally cracking. You didn't ask. You didn't investigate. You just took the check. And now you want mercy? We're your parents. No, I said. My parents died 5 years ago in a desert in Nevada. I'm an orphan. Valerie, please. Brenda is living in our basement. She's falling apart. Derek is ruined. We're all suffering. And where were you when I was sleeping in a bus station? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Where were you when I was eating soup kitchen food? Where were you when I was having nightmares? Silence on the other end. Goodbye, Eleanor. Don't call this number again. I hung up. I blocked the number. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I thought I would feel guilty. I waited for the guilt. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt clean. Garrett walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He saw my face. They called? She called. And I hung up. Garrett set the groceries down and hugged me. I'm proud of you. They're losing everything, I said. Dad is arrested. Brenda is destitute. Derek is facing prison. They dug the hole, Val, Garrett said. You just took away the ladder. The next day, the news broke. Derek Reynolds had declared bankruptcy. His assets were being liquidated to pay his creditors. The suburban house, my old home, was seized. I bought it back. Yes, you heard me. I used a shell company. I bought my old house at the foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. Not to live in it. I never wanted to step foot in that place again. I bought it to give it away. I donated the house to a local nonprofit that provided transitional housing for women escaping domestic abuse. I named it the Marcy House, after the woman at the gas station who saved my life. It was the ultimate revenge. The house Derek stole from me, the house he tried to use to erase me, would now be a sanctuary for women fleeing men just like him. And the best part? I sent Derek a thank you card in prison. Just a picture of the new sign out front, the Marcy House, safe haven for women. I heard later from his lawyer that he tore the photo into tiny pieces. The day of the sentencing hearing was gray and rainy, fitting weather for the funeral of Derek's life. I sat in the front row, wearing white. A symbolic choice. I wasn't mourning. I was reborn. Garrett sat beside me, holding my hand. Aunt Louise was on my other side, wearing a hat with a veil, looking like a vengeful Victorian widow. Derek was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked terrible. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair was shaved. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a twitchy, fearful desperation. Brenda wasn't there. She was reportedly in a rehab facility, paid for by selling her jewelry. My parents weren't there. My father was on house arrest pending his own trial, and my mother was too ashamed to show her face. The judge, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, read the charges. Derek Reynolds, you have pleaded no contest to 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of insurance fraud, and 1 count of forgery. Your actions were not only criminal but morally repugnant. You abandoned your wife, stole her livelihood, and attempted to legally erase her existence for profit. Derek stood up. His lawyer had advised him to show remorse. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice cracking. I made mistakes. I lost my way. I loved my wife. I got scared. You got greedy, the judge corrected him. I'm sorry, Valerie, Derek said, turning to look at me. He tried to summon tears. I'm so sorry. Please. Tell them. Tell them we had good years. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had wasted 15 years on. I stood up. The judge nodded, allowing me to speak. Your Honor, I said. We did have good years. Or I thought we did. But a marriage isn't defined by the good years. It's defined by what happens in the bad ones. In my worst moment, when I was stranded and vulnerable, this man didn't just leave me. He laughed. He laughed as he drove away. And then he spent 5 years trying to bury me. I took a deep breath. I don't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy. I just want him to be nothing. I want him to be a memory that fades. But before that, I want him to understand that women are not disposable. We are not assets to be liquidated. We are people. And when you try to erase us, sometimes, we rewrite the story. The judge nodded. Well said. He banged his gavel. Derek Reynolds, I sentence you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $150,000 to the insurance company and all legal fees incurred by Ms. Morgan. Derek's knees buckled. The bailiff had to hold him up. 8 years, he wailed. That's my whole life. You stole 5 years of hers, the judge said. Consider it a discount. As they dragged him away, he looked back at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. Only shock. He still couldn't believe that the mouse had caught the cat. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into the rain. Reporters were there. The story of the gas station wife had hit the local news. Ms. Morgan. Ms. Morgan. Do you have a comment? I stopped. I looked at the cameras. Just one, I said. If you are in a relationship where you feel invisible, start saving your money. Start building your exit. And never, ever let them drive the car. I turned and walked away, Garrett's arm around my waist. We drove back to Whispering Bay in silence. But it was a comfortable silence. It's over, I said, watching the windshield wipers swish back and forth. Not quite, Garrett said, smiling mischievously. What do you mean? We still have to deal with the loan shark. What? I sat up straight. I thought the police handled that. They did, Garrett said. But the lender, he holds the note on Derek's debt. And since Derek is in prison, the lender sees Derek's only remaining asset. He has no assets. He had one, Garrett said. A storage unit. Full of his collectibles. Sports memorabilia. Vintage watches. Stuff he hid from the bankruptcy court. And I bought the contents of the unit at the auction this morning, Garrett said. For you. Why would I want his junk? Because, Garrett said, inside that unit was something I think you've been missing. He reached into the back seat and handed me a small, dusty box. I opened it. Inside was my grandmother's pearl necklace. The one Brenda had coveted. The one I thought was lost or sold years ago. Derek had stolen it before the trip and hidden it, planning to give it to Brenda later. I held the cool pearls against my cheek and cried. Not for Derek. But for the piece of my history that had come home. Thank you, I whispered. Welcome home, Val, Garrett said. 6 months later. The seasons had changed in Whispering Bay. The gray rains of winter had given way to a glorious, blooming spring. The hydrangeas in Aunt Louise's garden were exploding in shades of blue and purple. My life had bloomed too. I was no longer hiding. I was Valerie Morgan, owner of a successful online financial consulting firm for women. I helped women secretly build their own freedom funds just like I had. I was sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, when my phone rang. A number I had blocked. But my voicemail picked it up. Curiosity got the better of me. I listened to the message. It was Brenda. Valerie, she sounded broken. Her voice was raspy, stripped of all its former arrogance. Valerie, I'm working at a diner in Spokane. It's hard. My feet hurt. Mom and Dad. Dad is in jail for the perjury thing. Mom had to sell the house to pay the lawyers. She's living in a condo. Nobody talks to us. She paused, sniffing. I just wanted to say, I know I don't deserve it. But I miss you. I miss my big sister. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can I write to you? I sat there, listening to the seagulls. I looked at the ocean. I thought about forgiveness. Forgiveness is a tricky thing. People tell you to forgive for your own peace. But sometimes, forgiveness is just permission for them to hurt you again. I didn't hate Brenda anymore. I pitied her. She was a product of our parents' toxicity, just as I was. But while I broke the cycle, she drowned in it. I deleted the message. I didn't call her back. I didn't write. Some doors, once closed, should be nailed shut. I stood up and walked down to the beach. A small wedding arch was set up on the sand. White chairs were arranged in rows. Today was the day. Garrett was waiting for me at the altar. He looked handsome in a linen suit, the wind catching his graying hair. Aunt Louise was there, wearing a dress that was possibly too bright for a wedding, but perfect for her. Marcy, yes, Marcy from the gas station, was there too. I had flown her out. She was my maid of honor. You clean up nice, Marcy whispered as I took my place beside her. Thanks to you, I whispered back. The ceremony was simple. We didn't promise to obey. We promised to witness each other. To protect each other. To never leave each other behind. When Garrett slipped the ring on my finger, a vintage sapphire, nothing like the flashy diamond Derek had given me, I felt a sense of completion I had never known. I do, I said. And I meant it with every cell in my body. After the ceremony, we had a reception in the garden. We ate seafood, drank wine, and danced under string lights. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, I stepped away from the party for a moment. I walked to the edge of the cliff, looking out at the vast Pacific. I touched my stomach. I hadn't told Garrett yet. I wanted to be sure. But the doctor had confirmed it yesterday. Against all odds. After 7 years of failure with Derek. After being told I was broken. I was pregnant. It turns out, the stress of living with a narcissist can do terrible things to a body. And peace? Peace can heal things you thought were dead. I watched the waves crash against the rocks. I thought about the woman I was 5 years ago, scared, invisible, standing in the dust of a gas station with $20 in her pocket. I wished I could go back and hug her. I wished I could whisper in her ear, "It's going to be okay. In fact, it's going to be better than okay. You are going to lose everything, and it will be the best thing that ever happens to you." Garrett came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I turned in his arms. I looked at his kind eyes, the wrinkles that came from smiling, not frowning. "I'm thinking about the future," I said. "And I have a little surprise for you." "Oh." He smiled. "Did you buy another foreclosure?" "Better," I said. I took his hand and placed it on my belly. His eyes widened. He stopped breathing for a second. "Val? Are you?" We are, I said. The joy that exploded on his face was brighter than the sunset. He picked me up and spun me around, laughing. We're going to be a family, he said, kissing me. A real family. Yes, I said. A real one. People ask me sometimes if I regret the time I lost. The 15 years with Derek. The 5 years in hiding. I tell them, you don't lose time. You spend it learning. I learned that blood doesn't make a family, loyalty does. I learned that money is freedom, but only if you control it. I learned that the scariest thing in the world isn't being alone, it's being with people who make you feel alone. Derek is currently serving year 2 of his sentence. He writes me letters sometimes. I never open them. I put them directly into the shredder. I heard from a mutual friend that he's aged 20 years. He works in the prison laundry. He tells everyone his wife tricked him. He's still the victim in his own story. That's the thing about narcissists, they never change the script, even when the audience has left the theater. Brenda is still in Spokane. She's married to a guy she met at the diner. I hear they argue a lot. I hope she finds peace, but I know she won't find it until she stops looking for it in other people's pockets. My parents? They are old and bitter. They blame me for their downfall. They tell anyone who will listen that their ungrateful daughter ruined them. Let them talk. My happiness is loud enough to drown them out. Garrett and I have a daughter now. Her name is Louise, after my aunt. She has Garrett's eyes and my stubbornness. We still live in Whispering Bay. I still trade stocks, but I spend more time building sandcastles. Every year, on the anniversary of the day Derek left me at the gas station, I do something special. I don't mourn. I celebrate. I take Garrett and little Louise to an ice cream shop. I buy us the biggest, sweetest sundaes on the menu. We sit in the sun, and we laugh. We laugh until our sides hurt. Because laughter shouldn't be cruel. It shouldn't be the sound of someone driving away from you. It should be the sound of people who are happy you are there. If you are listening to this story, and you feel stuck. If you feel like you are standing in the dust, watching your life drive away without you, please, listen to me. Don't run after the car. Let it go. Turn around. Look at the road behind you. Look at the strength in your own legs. There is a bus coming. Or a kind stranger. Or just a quiet path that leads to the ocean. Take it. Walk away from the people who hurt you. Walk toward the people who see you. You are not a victim. You are just in the middle of your plot twist. And trust me, the ending? The ending is going to be spectacular. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to restart your life, or if you're dreaming of doing it, please leave a 1 in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. And remember to subscribe, because we survivors? We have to stick together. I'm Valerie Morgan. And I'm finally home. And so, Valerie's journey reminds us of one profound truth: resilience is born in the face of betrayal, and strength is forged in the fires of adversity. Her story is not just about survival, it's about rediscovering one's worth, reclaiming power, and redefining what it means to truly live. It teaches us that even when life shatters into pieces, we have the power to gather those fragments and build something stronger, something unbreakable. At its core, this tale is a testament to the value of self-respect and the courage to let go of what no longer serves us. It's a reminder that we are not defined by the people who abandon us, but by how we rise after they're gone. Valerie didn't just find freedom, she found herself, and in doing so, she created a life filled with love, purpose, and peace. Her story inspires us to trust in the process of healing and to believe that brighter days always lie ahead. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild after a loss or betrayal? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Let's keep this circle of strength and inspiration growing.